It was a chilly November evening when the bus dropped Meher off at the edge of Shandamper, a village wrapped in mist and silence. The driver, an old man with sunken eyes, muttered something in a dialect she didn't understand and drove off hurriedly, without even waiting for her to step away from the road. She clutched her shawl tighter and glanced around. The air was heavy. The trees that lined the path seemed to be watching her. Meher had never heard of Shandamper until last week, when she received a letter claiming her grandmother had passed and left for the ancestral home. She didn't even remember the woman, just a vague memory of wrinkled hands and the scent of camphor. What puzzled her was that her parents never spoke of this village or its people. She started walking down the muddy path toward the house mentioned in the letter. Every step echoed, louder than it should have. The village appeared to be caught in a strange stillness, with no sign of life except the occasional flicker of lanterns behind curtained windows. No dogs barked, no children played. The silence was unnatural. She finally found the house. It was large, colonial style, with wooden pillars, lattice windows, and a veranda that sagged with age. A strange symbol was carved into the doorframe, worn down but still visible. The house looked abandoned, yet the front door creaked open before she could knock. No one was there. Inside, a cold draft welcomed her. Dust blanketed everything, and cobwebs hung like drapes. Yet, there were fresh footprints on the floor, too large to be hers. She should have turned back then. But she didn't. Meher settled in for the night in the bedroom upstairs. The bed creaked under her weight. The air smelled of mold and old incense. She tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. At midnight, she heard footsteps pacing downstairs. Then a slow knock echoed from the attic. She remembered the symbol on the door, and she knew she was not alone in the house. Meher didn't sleep that night. The knock from the attic had been soft, barely audible, but it echoed in her skull like thunder. She sat frozen on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The sound didn't return, but the silence afterward was worse, stretching thin like a tightrope, threatening to snap. As dawn approached, the house seemed to return to stillness. The birds outside didn't sing. The wind didn't stir the trees. Even time felt sluggish. Meher finally stepped out of her room, each floorboard groaning in protest beneath her feet. She decided she had to know what was above her, what was in the attic. The entrance to the attic was a narrow wooden staircase at the far end of the hallway, covered in cobwebs and barely visible unless you were looking for it. As she approached, she saw deep scratches on the wall beside the staircase. Claw-like marks. Something had tried to claw its way out. Her hand trembled as she reached for the attic door and pulled. It opened with a sound that sent shivers through her spine. The attic was dim and dusty. Broken furniture lay strewn across the room. Old trunks were stacked in the corners. A single small window allowed a beam of gray light to pierce through the darkness. In that light stood a figure, wooden, still, and lifeless. It was a mannequin. Its face was cracked, and its mouth hung open as if in an eternal scream. Around its neck was a string of black prayer beads, and carved into its chest was the same symbol she had seen on the front door. She took a step closer. That was when she noticed a mirror. An old, tall mirror leaned against the wall across from the mannequin. Its frame was covered in strange inscriptions. She should have turned away. She should have walked down and left the house forever. But instead, she stepped in front of the mirror and saw something that wasn't her. Her reflection looked like her, but the eyes were wrong. Too dark, too hollow, and it was smiling, though Meher was not. As she stared, the reflection slowly lifted its hand, not in sync with her own movement, and placed it against the glass. Meher stumbled back, heart pounding. She blinked, and the mirror showed only her now. Normal. Shaken. She turned her attention to a stack of dusty papers on a nearby table. Among them, she found an old diary, her grandmother's. The entries began mundanely, but grew more frantic with time. One page read, "The villagers do not speak of the night things. They seal their homes after sunset. We are warned not to let mirrors face the moonlight. It is through reflection that the darkness sees us." Another, "It came to me last night, not in a dream, but through the mirror. It took my voice, and now it waits. I tried to trap it in the glass, bind it with the sigil. but the seal is weakening. Soon it will be free. Meher's breath caught in her throat. The mirror was a prison, and something inside it wanted out. She began to connect the pieces. The strange symbol wasn't decoration. It was a seal. The silence in the village wasn't peace. It was fear, and her presence had disturbed the fragile balance that held something monstrous at bay. That night, she did not sleep. She sat in the living room, clutching the diary, listening to the shifting wood of the house. Every creak was louder now, every shadow darker. At precisely midnight, the mirror in the attic shattered. A scream followed, inhuman and shrill. The nightmare had escaped. The scream rang through the house like a banshee's wail, rattling windows and shaking Meher to her core. She clutched the diary to her chest as she stumbled backward from the sound. The shattering of the mirror above was no ordinary break. It sounded as though a wall between worlds had cracked open. Meher didn't want to go upstairs, but something compelled her. She had to see, had to know. She climbed the stairs slowly, her torch flickering in her hand. When she reached the attic, the air had changed. It was colder, thicker, almost like breathing through a silk cloth. The door to the attic was wide open. The room was darker than it should have been. The single window now completely black, as though night itself had seeped through the glass. The mirror was gone. Not shattered, gone. The wall where it had leaned now had a deep vertical burn mark scorched into the wood. The mannequin had fallen to the floor, the prayer beads scattered. The strange sigil that had once been carved into its chest had been gouged out. Something had clawed it away. And then she heard it. Not a sound, but a whisper inside her head. "You let me out." Meher spun around. No one. The attic was empty. "I see you now. I've worn your face before. I will wear it again." The air grew colder. Her torch flickered out. Pitch darkness. She bolted down the stairs, heart hammering like a drum, but the house had changed. The walls felt narrower and the shadows deeper. Every picture frame now held only dark smears where faces had once been. The windows showed nothing but blackness, as if the world beyond no longer existed. She ran to the front door and yanked it open, only to find another hallway. She had entered a loop. The house was no longer a building. It was a trap. The diary had mentioned a way to bind the entity, a ritual passed down through generations, known only to her grandmother's bloodline. Meher flipped frantically through the brittle pages until she found it. To bind the thing that walks between reflections, one must show it its true self, in the moon's eye with fire and salt and blood of its host. She didn't know what moon's eye meant, but fire and salt she could manage. She raced to the kitchen and found a jar of old salt and a box of matches. She tore a curtain into strips, soaked them in oil from a rusted lantern, and made a ring on the floor. In the center, she placed a shard of broken mirror from upstairs. Then she cut her palm with a kitchen knife. Blood dripped into the ring. The house trembled. And then it came, from the hallway, crawling like smoke, bending the air around it. Its shape shifted. Sometimes it looked like her, sometimes like her grandmother, sometimes like something not human at all. It didn't walk, it floated, its face melting and reforming with every second. "You can't bind what has no name," it hissed. Meher stood her ground. "But I can show you who you are." She held up the shard of mirror. The creature recoiled but couldn't look away. Its face flickered with confusion, rage, fear. Meher tossed salt at it. The entity screamed and writhed, smoke rising from its form. She lit the curtain. Fire erupted in a circle. The thing shrieked as the flames rose. It tried to lunge at her, but hit the invisible wall of the salt ring. Its skin cracked like glass, eyes hollow and bottomless. It thrashed against the flames, its screams now turning into desperate howls. "You came through the mirror," Meher said, holding up the diary. "Now go back into it." As the creature writhed in pain, she chanted the words written at the bottom of the ritual page, words in a language she couldn't speak, but her blood seemed to remember. The mirror shard glowed faintly. The flames roared higher. With one last scream, the entity exploded into a plume of black smoke and was sucked into the shard, which then shattered into ash. The fire died. Silence returned. When morning came, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time in days. The villagers emerged from their homes, cautious and wide-eyed. Word spread quickly. The darkness is gone. Meher stood outside the old house, her bandaged hand clutched around the diary. The sigil on the door had reappeared, fresh and unbroken. The mirror was gone forever, but she would never trust